All right, super happy to be here with Greg White. So Greg, I met you through a YouTube video.
hmm
You were
Yeah,
doing an
how did you find
yeah.
that? That was just
It's
out of
so,
nowhere.
that's a really good question, actually. I think it came out of YouTube's algorithm.
Hmm.
Isn't that weird? That's
I
just
know.
it's either that or Twitter X had
Sure.
some surfaced something.
hmm
Um, may have been from your interviewer.
hmm
And then that anyway, so
Yeah.
I saw the word abundance in the interview
hmm
title. I'm like, that's interesting. Okay.
hmm
And then I listened to I think both of your interviews and I thought, oh
Mm.
man, this guy's good. So I wanted to talk with you.
I
And
appreciate that.
in the past couple of weeks, we have been talking over private messaging,
hmm
and you have been educating me quite a bit about uh, Bitcoin. So we're going to
hmm
talk about that as well. And of course, the number one objection people have to Bitcoin these days is energy.
hmm
And you happen to be in the energy industry, right? Like
Of
you have more above average knowledge about it anyway. So I want to ask you about that.
course.
And yeah, I'm sure other things will come up. But let's begin with abundance.
hmm
Yeah, it's how I found you, and I think a lot of folks who are connected to me like the idea of abundance. Usually we think about it in terms of the mindset of abundance. It's which is hard sometimes when materially we might not be abundant yet.
Right.
Or we look around in our world and we see, gosh, so many people are not abundant yet.
hmm
But the mindset is, of course, without the mindset, there can't be the actions and the projects that can actually fulfill that dream, that optimism.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but so and you have a blog and you write about abundance. Okay,
Yes.
so I want you to go wherever you want to go with this. But
Sure.
how are you thinking about abundance these days? What does that mean to you?
Yeah.
Why is it important?
So a few years ago, actually probably more like five now, I came to this conclusion that even with basically the current technology at the time, uh, there was kind of a trifecta of technologies that would infinitely reinforce themselves to create price collapse, is what I started to call it. And so solar energy and batteries, like at the time, they were some of the cheapest energy sources possible. We were getting to the point with robotics where we're going to be able to automate most labor, and then with AI, just digital intelligence. Currently it's in the LLM form with agents and things like that. But even at the time, I saw like, hey, we're with very few years into the future progression, we will have the ability with those three technologies, right? So if you have digital intelligence, you can have self-driving cars, you can have like automation in the paper pushing, but also everything that has to do with intelligence work as well. So if you want coding, you want to design things as an engineer, right? Even if you're not completely automating it, if you're speeding people up by 50%, 75%, 90%, right? Like that's going to have a drastic impact on prices. And it self-reinforces, right? So if energy is cheaper, then operating robots is cheaper and operating AIs is cheaper. If those things are cheaper, then designing new generators or cars or whatever gets cheaper. And so the cost of cars goes down, which you can see how this just infinitely reinforces. And, there's no real ceiling to the amount of stuff we can create, even sustainably, um, once those technologies really come into their own. And I don't think it's 20 years. It does feel more on the order of 2 than 20 years in terms of how
Wow.
long until those things, you know, abilities could do that. That doesn't mean necessarily the whole world shifts in 2 years because it takes a while for the build out to happen, adoption, people to understand it enough to say, as a business owner, yes, please, let's do this. But yeah, that started to get my brain firing, and I was like, look, I don't think people have thought through how close this is, but also the implications. Um, Societally, economically, from a mindset perspective, what's going to get in the way, all those things, started to come up for me. So I started writing it down because I was like, look, I'm not hearing anybody talk about a practical path to abundance, right? I'm hearing people talk about abundance mindset, which is 100% required for us to get there. And I've heard people talk about like this like far off future where everything costs nothing. But like even sci-fi, there's only one book series I've ever come across that actually explores the idea of a post-scarcity civilization in detail, right? It's hinted at in Star Trek, it's, implied in some things, but the Culture series is the only one I've actually ever seen explore societally what are the effects of a post-scarcity abundant society. And so I was like, okay, definitely there's an imagination gap. So I wanted to explore that.
Amazing. Wow. I love that trifecta. I love that kind
Hmm.
of reinforcing loop. And it's very, I love the simplicity of it and sort of
Hmm.
the optimism that's there. And it's also um, easy for us to see the continued advancements in it. So
Hmm.
that's the sort of the hopefulness of it. Is like, it's oh, okay, there's advancement. Robotics, just we were just talking about it before we started recording. Amazon, there's a leaked document saying that they're going to
Hmm.
replace 600,000 jobs in the next few years with
Yeah.
robots.
Hmm.
And I'm actually surprised that they haven't already done so, but I guess robotics is really just starting to come into
Hmm.
its heyday really in the next 5 years, it seems like.
Right.
I'm seeing little demos of like Figure robots and things like Figure is one of the big companies, right? Or one of the pioneering companies here in the
Yep.
States. And China, of course, my goodness, China, it seems to be, I think, I think more tech advanced than many of us Westerners understand.
Yes. Yes.
I have a brother who lives in China, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I haven't been there in many, many years. Originally, we were from Taiwan, and most of my family's still in Taiwan. So
Hmm.
hopefully, China will leave Taiwan alone. And
That's the hope.
if they develop their own chips, right, then they don't have
Right.
to invade. Okay, so I wanna talk
Yeah, let's talk
about
about Amazon because it's an
yes,
interesting
yes,
point.
right.
And it's actually indicative of a lot of this debate that I find to be disingenuous, but also like people can't know better without better information.
Mm,
So, Amazon's been the largest deployer of robots for decades,
right.
right? Like it's not new information. They've been pioneering. Like you ever seen those like really fast Roombas that go and like pick up whole? They've been doing that for 10 plus years, right? Like this isn't new. Honestly, the pick and place stuff, like experimented with so many pick and place robots over the years that it's like, hey, we finally found one. Like it doesn't have to be humanoid robots
Right.
that would make, half or more of the workers in the warehouse redundant. And that's just part of it. Those jobs also kind of suck, right? Like
Yes.
people are suffering dearly, and it's because like the ever expanding need for margins is going to squeeze the humans, right? And people are worried about job loss. I do think that's totally valid. I don't want people to hear that job loss is not going to happen. It will definitely happen. But as you've seen in every piece of history, new jobs are kind of created out of this. We are in a unique situation where robots and AI can kind of do what humans do completely, as opposed to like the horse and buggy to the car. That was a very different era in history. At the same time, we have a lot more choices now. And so I think, the question is how do you organize society in a way where humans can still participate in things they find meaningful, even if they're not completely necessary to the running of like the essential economy, right? Twitch streamers, love them to death, not necessarily essential for the furtherment of humanity, but they still provide value. And that's measured by the fact that they make money, right? People are willing to pay them. Um, and so I think that, what will happen is humans will transition into what I call the craft economy, where robots and AIs kind of do most of the hard labor, all of the stuff that's necessary to like grow food, make houses, all the things that are essential. And then we will develop and sell our crafts, right? And so whether your craft is chess or it's woodworking or jewelry or poetry or coaching or being a pastor or whatever it is, right? Like you're going to develop and sell your craft, and that's the same thing as being in marketing or being somebody that doesn't that like you can do the craft and people will have demand for that. The reason why I think that demand for the craft will exist, I don't think you have to impose this, is because people have always demanded, uh, you know, the best human-made stuff, right? And scarcity is not going to go away. It's just going to shift from steak and lithium or gold or whatever to, can you get the Birkin bag, right? Equivalent of the future, right? Can you get the George Kao coaching class? He's only going to teach it to 100 people in a year, right? Whatever it is, like there will be the scarcity of I got it from that artist or that, ceramicist or whatever it is. And your craft doesn't have to be all, physical arts. It can also be entrepreneurship. It could be, physics. Like you may not actually, be the ones making all the big discoveries, but you will be the person that like teaches and interacts with physics and helps pull people into that community, whatever it is. No way. And so I think that's where the economy will go in a positive way. So you don't need UBI, you don't need all these handouts or like imposed new economics. It's just that we shift what humans do to what is more meaningful.
Yeah, this is really hopeful. And
Mhm.
right now, the way that these things are rolling out,
Mhm.
we probably all seen the meme that's like, I wanted AI to do my laundry, but
Yeah,
now I'm the one doing the laundry while the AI
right.
is creating the art. And
Exactly.
it's like,
Yes.
but it's true that digital intelligence is far easier to expand and automate than
Yes.
physical intelligence. And
Right.
so it is true that the white collar jobs seem to be disappearing.
Yes.
It's funny as I say that because on the one hand, supposedly the white collar jobs are disappearing, but on the other
Mhm.
hand, I haven't seen a lot of reports of that, you
Yes.
know,
Well,
and
most of the reports on job loss to automation at this point, this is not going to continue to be true forever.
yeah,
Honestly, from business owner to business owner, are mostly just a cover for doing a layoff without having to go through the hassle of a layoff.
yeah, right,
It's like, hey, Elon showed us that you can operate Twitter with
right.
75% less staff and still be profitable and move faster. And a lot of people are trying it under the guise of we've automated this, or
That's right.
we're
Yes,
outsourcing this piece
yeah,
to somebody that does automate it, or something
right.
like that. But it really is just, it's a layoff. It's
It's
just they
a
don't want to have to
yeah.
admit that they're laying people off.
I have noticed that, in my field, I work with a lot of uh, solopreneurs who are trying
Hmm.
to make a living, providing some kind of service that they're passionate about.
Hmm.
Things like coaching, things like, mentoring and counseling and things like that. And of course, a big part of this is content because that's how
Right.
we get known in the world. And I have noticed in the past couple of years, particularly
Hmm.
this year, that it's getting harder and harder to be
Can be.
seen
Yes.
because the amount of AI content, it's
Is
normal.
huge.
It's normal
Yeah.
now to be producing a lot of AI content. And even people, and I've seen, it's like when AI content first started happening, we kind of made fun of it because, oh, that's so, M dashes or whatever. Like that's obviously
Yes.
ChatGPT. But I've noticed that we've gotten more and more used to it. And at
Yes.
least I have. And now I'm honestly like, well, I use AI probably more than the average person. And I'm like,
Right.
I can tell when something's AI and
Hmm.
I don't even mind anymore.
Right.
Like I'm like, is it good? Is it
Yes.
is it interesting?
Yes.
Is it useful?
Hmm.
Then I'm going to give it a heart or like or whatever.
Yes.
And so I do it's this weird transition we're in. I want the future you're talking about to happen
Hmm.
ASAP with physical intelligence. At the same time, I feel like right now it seems like the intellectual work is being, taken over sooner
For
than
now.
than
Yeah.
that.
It's also, it's a transition period, right?
Yeah.
So think about it this way, like, what's your favorite podcast? And think about if that podcast was, from whoever and they generated it and you
Yeah.
knew it was generated, right?
Right.
Both sides of,
Yeah.
or all the people involved were all generated.
Yeah.
Would you still listen to it? Probably
No.
not,
It's
right?
harder. It's harder to say yes to that. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a difference between informational
Yes.
content,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And that podcast that's like I'm interviewing somebody or I'm, it's like a conversation or it's people getting together, right? And that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying is there's a bifurcation between labor that is practical
Right.
versus what is relational,
Yes.
right? And so I
Yes.
do think what's going to happen is that that bifurcation will become clearer because people are going to experiment. You're going to have some big podcaster be like, that whole thing was generated and you didn't notice, right? Whoop, everybody hates it. Nobody wants it anymore. And it's because they're there for them, the people, not for the words coming out of their mouth, right? That may have been what hooked them in, but it's not why they stay a loyal follower and listener. And that's going to happen with everything, right? Chairs, mugs, right? Like anything you can create as a human, like you're going to want that because it is scarce, right? It's the similar transition of like lace. Lace was a symbology or was a symbol of your wealth because it was extremely difficult to make, right? Aluminum used to be the most expensive element on Earth to the point where Napoleon, when he gifted something to a delegation, he gave them aluminum dinnerware, right? And to us, we're like, we throw that shit in the trash can. Like people mistakenly throw that out. And it used to be literally the most precious thing on Earth. And it's because like when scarcity changes, what becomes luxury or, oh, that is the most sought after thing changes. And the Birkin bag, right? Ferraris, right? It's like a Ferrari doesn't cost that much to produce compared to a Toyota Camry in terms of like, it's not 1,000 times more expensive to produce. It's because they artificially, constrain the production. They could scale up and make it for $100,000, instead of what it is. But that's kind of where I think like we have to get our minds around like this is transitionary period. When people start to see like they can't tell the difference between AI generated and real, they're going to demand a label. So you're going to get people saying like I'm a certified human content creator, right? Like YouTube's going to have like this was AI generated, like they have this has sponsored content in it, right? That label was added to YouTube videos on purpose. You're going to have the same labels because humans will demand to continue to get things from other humans.
Yeah.
Not to say AI slop will not go away. It
Right.
will still be around, but it
Right.
won't be as
Well,
dominant as we think it is now.
I mean, Sora right now
Yes.
is one of the most advanced AI video models, and
Yes.
I'm seeing Sora videos pop up everywhere,
Yeah.
Facebook,
Everywhere.
Instagram, everywhere, and there is the label Sora
For
very
now.
clearly on there. So
Yes.
I think people are getting normalized to that, and
Yes.
I think you're right. I think you're right that the word organic will take on a new meaning
Yeah.
in
Right.
the coming years. So
Yes.
this is interesting, and I think that is hopeful. And I do
Mhm.
notice, like I said, even though I'm very sensitive to AI content, I therefore it's kind of like I say to you like, how when stock photography became a thing,
Yes.
you know, people at first probably thought, wow, that looks like a really great picture. But now we all
Mhm.
know what's a stock photo.
Yes.
It looks very stock. It's like
Yes.
somehow the humans were, we just naturally became, trained just based
Mhm.
on exposure to to this is fake and this is more authentic
Exactly.
photography or whatever. And same thing with, CGI, right? And in movies, we're like, yeah,
Mhm.
that didn't really happen, did it? Like,
Yes.
they and so I think yes, I think AI will be like that too. Okay. I want to talk about, related to all this, our work is going to transition. I think there's
Mhm.
going to be a hard period right now, honestly,
Yes.
when prices aren't the hyper deflation isn't here yet, right?
Mhm.
Because right now we still only know inflation.
Yes.
Okay. And I think a lot of people listening to this may or may not be aware that inflation doesn't originate from a business owner going, you know what? I think I'm going to raise prices this year.
Mhm.
It's like,
Well, that only happens in isolated pockets where they
right,
have market power, right? If you're a
right,
healthcare
right.
company, you could
Yeah,
just raise prices because
that's
demand will
true.
never go down, right? And there's no incentive, there's not very much competition and all that stuff. But in the large sense, inflation is caused by money printing, not by greedy corporations, as evidenced by the fact that rents are going down in cities where rents went up, 5 years ago. It's like it's not that their greed changed, it's because the supply changed, right?
This is so good. The supply changed, which
Hmm.
changed the prices.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the future that you write about in your blog, there will be a lot more supply.
Correct. Yes. And it's the only sustainable system for promoting abundance, right? The controversial take I have is that communism is a attempted shortcut to abundance without the attendant hyperabundance of supply, right? It's the idea that, you look around and you're like, oh, this food is being thrown out. We must have plenty of food. Nobody should starve, right? In every stage of communism has gotten really popular. It's because like we see hyperabundance for the capitalists, right? And what are we stuck here with, right? And so you look around in jealousy and you say, well, we just need to redistribute, right? That's the spiral, though, is that you cannot get to abundance without hyper increasing supply, right? The reason is not necessarily just like physical. It's like, yes, theoretically, you could redistribute the productive capacity of the United States and make everybody pretty wealthy. But think about it this way: if you were to take, you know, replace everybody's hearts with the heart of an angel tomorrow on Earth, right? You cannot redistribute what is globally produced to make everybody as wealthy as an American, right? There's not enough quality housing. There's not enough quality cars. There's not enough electricity generation for all the air conditioning necessary for people in Brazil to live at the same level that people in Missouri do, right? Like it will take years, if not decades, of perfectly angelic coordination to get to the point where everybody can live like an American, right? And that should tell you that it's a production problem. It is not a redistribution problem. Now, there's definitely valid criticisms of like, hey, a flawed version of capitalism still does not, advance everybody equally, and definitely disadvantages some people over others. Still, like imperfect capitalism gets you there a lot faster and much more reliably than imperfect communism.
Yeah, man, this is huge. And I recently saw that, well, maybe we all have seen like communism is on the rise. I mean, at least in
Yes.
terms of the belief in the possibility, the power of communism, the potential of communism is on the rise,
Mhm.
and young people
Yeah.
particularly who have
It's
been,
completely natural.
yeah, right. Well, I was a communist when I was
Yeah.
younger,
Right. Yes.
because I was part of the Green Party, and like it makes no sense that rich people have all that money and they
Mhm.
to go and grab some of their money and then give it to the rest of us. And then of
Yes,
course I became sort of wiser to human dynamics, and what does that actually
yes,
do is it drives away the rich and productive people to other locations, other countries. They will always find a way to maintain their wealth and
for
and,
sure.
and their productive capacity. And anyway, it's
Well, even if you take the whole world and made it communist tomorrow,
yeah,
right? The elites inside of communism may be different people than the elites inside of capitalism, but there will always be elites that create the conditions that create the suffering, right? The problem is it's a horseshoe theory, right? Is like when you get to corporatist stuff on one end, right? It's not a spectrum of capitalism to socialism like this in the center, and you're on the right. It's that capitalism is in the center, corporatism is on one side, and socialism is on the other, and they're more alike to each other than otherwise. It's just who's in charge and how are things organized. But like it's essentially the real spectrum is elitism versus egalitarianism, right? It's are the people able to socially be mobile? Is it a meritocracy? Can you be wealthy based on your effort? Right? That's the ideal state. And then the crappy state is when the elites have all the markets. You can never do better. Even if you're the smartest person on earth with all of the best inventions, like you can't compete because you're not allowed, right? That's the end state of, big governments, corporatists and big government socialists is like and that creates suffering, right? And you see it now. I think we're more on the corporatist side in America. I think other countries in Europe are more on the socialist side, but it creates suffering because elites and elitism is the actual enemy. It's not one system versus the other. Capitalism is actually just like meant to be the thing that keeps elites from permanently being in charge, right? It creates a condition where they fall on their merits.
yes,
And so that's the thing is like it's not even that they can escape somewhere else. It's like even if the whole world was this way, it would still
yeah,
be bad.
right. And don't we want to buy from people who are the best at what they do?
Exactly.
It's like
Yes.
it's a thing. It's like, if you had to have a life altering surgery
Hmm.
for a loved one, are you
Yes.
going to choose the one with the best skill, or some other
Yes.
reason that they
Yes.
they represent a particular identity or something like that?
Right. And I'm not
Yeah.
ideologically pro-capitalist because of the ideology itself. It's not a circular thing. It's that, my goal in life, and I think most people, if they were asked, would want maximum human flourishing, right? You want people to have, they're not starving, they have meaningful, work in their lives, they're able to have the relationships they want to have, they don't want to be coerced, they're not being hurt or stolen from or anything, right? That's human flourishing is the goal. We all have the same goal. If you don't have that goal, you're a sociopath. Like, I can't deal with that. But most humans I've ever met, that's their goal, right? And the question is how. And when you get down to it, it's, if everybody had perfect hearts, like heaven, I think it might be socialist, right? But it's like it requires every heart in the universe to be angelic. And I'm not going to wait around for that. Like we can improve the world before that happens.
Yeah.
And so the
And
question is,
also
yeah.
you can't force other people to have
Oh, no.
angelic hearts. I mean, I
No.
think that's a problem. It's like, oh, you should want, dear rich person, dear billionaire,
Yes.
you should be giving a lot more money away. And it's
Yeah.
like, has shame and blame ever made someone a permanently loving person?
For sure.
Human
Never.
dynamics, folks. And what
Yeah.
you said about heaven is probably social. I think heaven has an abundance of supply. I think that's
Correct.
that's the, right. And
Yes.
and also I think about that quote, how in my family I'm socialist. You've heard this one, like, in my
Mhm.
family I'm socialist, in my community I am a Democrat, in my
Yes.
state I'm in my country I'm a Republican, and internationally I'm a libertarian, something like that.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Yes.
that makes a lot of sense. Of course, in my family where we love each other,
Yes.
we trust each other fully, we are willing to die for each other.
Right.
Socialists.
Yes.
Take whatever.
Share everything. Everything of mine is yours. Yes.
Everything of mine, but not some person I haven't met on the other side of the world. No, I mean, there's too many
Right.
of them.
Right.
First of all,
Well, it's trust. You can't build trust with 7 billion or 8 billion people. Like, humans don't have the capacity for that.
right. And which is why people who say, oh, well, socialism obviously works, just look at Denmark, look at
Right.
the Nordic countries. Well,
Mhm.
they are extremely small, homogenous,
Right.
trust-based
And
society.
it's too early to tell.
That's right. That's true. That's true.
Right. It's
Yeah.
only been 100 years max if you're generous. Right. And any system that can't survive 1,000 years is not the right system. And no system we've ever come up with has lasted 1,000 years yet.
So we'll see.
Even longest running civilizations like China, like, they have not had the same system the whole time. They've had characteristics that are similar across time, and they have a culture of cohesion that allows them to coordinate at larger scale than a lot of people can. But they've switched their system times in 300 years. And so, we have to be honest, intellectually honest. We don't know the right system that's going to help coordinate, but we do know that over 100+ years so far, capitalism has been the only effective system to coordinate, billions of people in a way that floats all boats. And the reason I say that is, when people talk about, we want the wealthy to give more away. Thought experiment with some math. If you take every single billionaire and you threw them in a wood chipper and took their money, which is a one-time event, right? You would essentially only be able to fund the U.S. government's deficits, not even its full budget for a year, right? You'd fund its deficits for a single year, and then you're looking around like, where the hell did that go, right? And so the question of, like, charity is that charity cannot fix scarcity. You have to produce more, and you have to find a system that helps to produce more. And the only system we've ever found to do that on a long enough time frame over really large populations that are culturally non-cohesive, right? And geographically non-cohesive, and skill, heterogeneous, is capitalism. And you come to this from first principles. You come to the idea that capitalism is the only system that works based on both history of, like, look at countries that were this way and countries that were that way, and what are the characteristics, but also just think about, like, how do you coordinate the labor of billions of people? You just can't centrally plan it, right? Things are too complicated. Your desire for broccoli is so much different from mine. You couldn't even name how much more valuable it is to me, and that's one interaction for one product in one moment. And so the question is, like, pricing is just there to help coordinate. It's not Yeah, and part of this is education. You know, I grew up in Portland, Oregon. My school was very different in how it portrayed history than on in books, just widely reading. And so you just like you don't hear all these different arguments or both sides or all sides of history. You hear one side, and part of it is also like economics is not required, but it is fundamental to understanding the best way to interact as a society. It's not, you know, democracy is barely half the battle. Like how you organize labor is so much more fundamental to fairness. And that's all about economics. And, you know, as evidenced by, I used to do a coffee every Saturday in Portland, and I just invite people to be, it's called the Protopia Coffee, right? Like, let's talk about not a utopian future, but like a, you know, for perpetually progressing future towards being better. And I would invite people, and I'd often get into these debates, and I'd ask this question, be like, "Oh wait, hold on, let me ask you this: if you doubled everybody's bank account tomorrow, would anybody be wealthier?" Almost everybody said, "Yeah, of course, they'd be wealthier. They have more money." And it's like, okay, so you're not on money is not wealth. The relative amount of money is your wealth, right? So if everybody doubles, nothing's changed. Prices will eventually adjust and you'll be basically where you are. It's just everything costs twice as much. So, you know, it's just that was a symptom to me of like, oh, just people haven't thought this through and understood what is money, you know, how does economics work? It's not that economics is like some sort of ideology. It's like this is the study of how humans interact when they have to exchange goods and labor.
Wow, this is really good. I'm gonna listen to that part again too.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage people to go check out your blog because you have a
Oh,
lot
thank
of
you.
writing about this abundance and
Hmm.
how we get there. I do want to make sure we have enough time to talk about um, our own individual building our own individual abundance, and
Hmm.
this is where Bitcoin comes in,
Yes.
right? So because yes, the future hopefully will have a lot more supply, prices hopefully will drop as a result, and at the same time, you know, the spending power of normal citizens with fiat currency. Those who don't know what fiat currency is, basically the US dollar, the euro, whatever the government says is money, right? That is, well, it's being inflated away every year, as we've seen. It's like, how come, a loaf of bread today is what it is versus 100 years ago when it was probably a few cents or something like that, right? And we all grow up in a world where, well, that's just assumed. Well, obviously, things are 100 times more expensive than they used to be 100 years ago or whatever it is. Obviously, that's just a law of nature.
Yes.
And but then I encountered Bitcoin,
Hmm.
and Bitcoin, interestingly, uh, it took more Bitcoin 10 years ago to buy a US house. Now it takes a lot less Bitcoin to buy a house. I'm like, oh, things are getting less expensive in Bitcoin terms. How interesting. What's going
Yes.
on here?
Hmm.
So tell us about that. Why are things getting? And there's a website which folks go look at. You should go Google it. Priced in Bitcoin. I
Mm.
just found out the other day, like priced in Bitcoin as a whole. There's
Hmm.
an index of, okay, how much does this cost? How much does that cost? And they track it over time, like how much Bitcoin does it cost to buy this versus buy that. And over
Yes.
time, of course, things are dropping in Bitcoin price, even though they
Right.
are raising in US dollar, euro, etc.
Yes.
So what's going on there?
Yeah, it's important to understand what money is, and most people haven't really thought about it. You know, I was talking to my uncle about this, a few years ago at a Thanksgiving dinner, and he like pulled out a dollar bill, and he's like, "Look, this is a dollar. What is a Bitcoin?" Right? And people don't quite understand that. Like, you think you know what a dollar bill is, but you kind of don't. And so you have to understand what is money, right? Um, just the technology we use to exchange goods and services, or to preserve our wealth over time, right? It's to the Michael Saylor thing is to move it through time and space, right? To move value through time and space, right? So if I want to send, value to China to buy a piece of equipment, right? Like that's moving through space, and then through time is holding it so that later I can spend it or give it to my kids or whatever, right? It is a mechanism for doing that, and it's not this magic thing. It is a technology that has been developed by humans and re-evaluated every century at the very least, right? So the earliest versions of money didn't exist. You would just barter, right? You give this, give that, right? There were versions of that were more like credit. It's like, look, I'll give you 6 horses today, you'll give me 2 cows later, right? That's credit, but it's less formal, right? And there's inefficiencies to it. And so over time, we developed like, oh, coinage is pretty good because we something out there that's scarce and make it so you can't counterfeit it or it's really hard to counterfeit. And that is what we say is money. So that like I can have, 10 gold coins today and 10 gold coins later will buy me the same amount of grain or whatever. Right? But it's a technology. Coinage was an advancement in monetary technology. And every advancement had a limitation, right? So the problem with gold, gold has been the best, but we had salt, silver, there were like these gemstones that people would just exchange, right? Like the problem with them, with like gemstones is sizing. It's really hard to divide a gemstone. And so you'd eventually just like have this weird credit system where like there's a bank full of gemstones and you get some portion of them, right? That's always where it ends up is paper is what you spend and it's backed by something over there. And then suddenly the government just takes all that over there and just says, you get to keep the paper and we call that money, right? That's how fiat always develops. Whether it's gemstones in a bank, silver in a bank, salt in a bank, gold in a bank, right? Paper thing that represents it eventually becomes the only thing. But it's because the paper is like, oh, I can move that through time and space so much easier, right? Like a bank, if I have to trust my bank with my gold, they could take the gold, right? They could lose the gold. They could lose it to a bank robber. Or somebody will take the gold, hollow it out, put some tungsten in there, cap it back, and hey, there's actually less gold, but you never know. So there's the limitation of money has always been this. And the best money we ever had before Bitcoin was gold because the problem with silver was that we found ways to make more silver. So you could inflate the supply. And so it became this thing where like I could counterfeit legally silver by just mining more. Right? You can't counterfeit the US dollar legally, but you can counterfeit silver by just mining more, right? And the thing about money is, and this is the thought experiment that helps a lot of people grasp it, is like, look, if there were 1 billion people on Earth and 1 billion gold coins, everybody has 1 gold coin. And tomorrow, and the only money we all used was the gold coin. And tomorrow, I was able to give everybody, like I mined a huge thing and I doubled everybody to 2 coins. Suddenly everything is going to cost twice as much, right? It's not magic. It's that if this is the thing I use to buy stuff and I have twice as much, then I can buy twice as much. And if I'm selling, it's like, oh, might as well just raise the price to match. And that's just how prices will work because the purpose of money is to be an accounting of your percentage of the wealth on Earth, right? So the amount of money I have versus somebody else tells you how much more wealth I have, which means the buying power that I have or the value that I've been given or earned over time is preserved in that way. And so if your money can be increased in supply, then it is not as good money as a money that cannot be inflated in supply. So gold has been the hardest thing to produce in history. It's like I think I remember reading that all of the gold that's ever been mined on Earth could fit on a tennis court 100 feet high. Right? That's not much. Right? All of the gold rings for wedding rings and all the earrings and all the bars of gold and all of Earth's history can fit on a tennis court like 100 feet high. And it's increasing 2% a year from mining. And that's the best we've ever done. Right? But the perfect money is a money that you cannot create anymore. It is instantaneously understood how much you have. You cannot like hollow it out and put tungsten in and fake you have more. You can infinitely divide it so that you can go to the grocery store and not have to chip off a little piece of gold, right, for your like $50 grocery purchase. And it's instantly transportable. It's light, so it's not like really difficult to transport. And it had no other purpose, right? It's not good for wiring like gold is. It's not good for, making cans like aluminum. It's not good for preservatives, right? Its only use is money, so it doesn't have any, competition in what it's being used for. And that would be the perfect money. And gold was the closest we had, and now Bitcoin is that because Bitcoin is essentially unfakeable. There'll only ever be 21 million of it. It has no other purpose. You can move it in 10 minutes, any amount, anywhere to anyone without any questions or permission. And that makes it really good money. Now the question is it going to be, the money of the future? Right? That is still an open question. I happen to believe yes, but it is a question of adoption because if people don't think that that's good money, then it's not good money. Because the other thing about what makes the technology of money work is the illusion that that is money. Because gold, like, why is gold money? Right? Why people always say, like, oh, gold is better than Bitcoin because it's worth something. It's like, but why? Right? Its only utility is jewelry and wiring, and it's wiring. Um, you know, so like, why is gold worth anything? It's the meme throughout thousands of years that it is valuable. And the question is like, why gold and not silver? In China, for a long time, silver was the money, right? Not gold. And it's because that was like the meme in their history that perpetuated as like silver is the thing that's valuable. And it only stopped being that way when we were able to industrially produce silver a lot higher quantities. And so, the amounts of money on earth got bigger, and that was like, oh shoot, if I want to preserve my wealth, that's a bad idea. So Bitcoin is just the most perfect money we've built so far.
Yeah, this is awesome, and I can already hear the objections by some people
Of
saying,
course.
"Well, but I can't spend the money. I can't spend Bitcoin right now to buy a
Yeah.
pizza,"
Right.
which is a famous story
Of
from
course.
years ago, where someone
Yes.
actually did spend some Bitcoin to
Oh,
like
yes. The
several
most
several
expensive
several
pizza on
Bitcoin.
earth. Yeah.
Right, and that's worth looking into. But so okay, what first of all, are there more and more people coming into the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think so too. I
absolutely.
mean, this is easily anyone can easily look this up. Okay, so go and look up. I think the last time I kind of looked into this, I need to do deeper research, but apparently there are more Bitcoin holders
Mhm.
than people who own stocks. But I have
Correct.
to, is that correct? Do you
That
know
is
that?
correct. Yes. And I saw some insane stat. I hope I'm not off by a ton
Okay.
here, but like more than half of Americans own some cryptocurrency,
Whoa.
right? And that's way more than stock. That's even more
Okay.
than people that do like bets, like
Yeah.
online gambling.
Well, I have to, we'll have to confirm this, but
Yes.
it's
So there's some
certainly
absurd amount.
more and more people.
Yes.
And by the way, sometimes they hold it without knowing that they're holding it because
Yes.
their 401k somehow has
Correct.
some funds that hold some Bitcoin that they don't realize has it. Okay, so if it's to become money,
Hmm.
it means that it has to be stable enough, obviously, because
Yes.
that's one of the famous characteristics of Bitcoin is it just keeps going
Yes.
up and down, up and down, up and
Right.
down. Truth is that it has gotten less volatile over
Correct.
time. So it's gotten
Correct.
the ups and downs have gotten more flattened over the past couple of years. So
Hmm.
it looks like it's starting to mature, right?
Yes.
And at some point, do you see it becoming so stable that, well, we can trade in it now?
Yeah, we can now. And so we're seeing the natural ecosystem evolve. So like the thing that creates stability in a market is predictability of supply and sophistication in trading. So, those, insanely ruthless people on Wall Street are going to be competing with each other to like short and do the options to like, screw the other guy, right? And, having huge moneyed interest doing that, right, creates stability because there's such a competition that you can't really manipulate the market because there's too many other people on the other side of the bet that like reality is found through these sophisticated markets, right? It's the same reason why like stocks are remarkably stable, on a day-to-day basis, compared to each other, right? It's because the only thing that changes the price of a stock is the overall market in terms of like conditions for all companies, and then the conditions for that company in particular, whether because of their performance or something happening in the world, right? And that's because there's so many people betting on opposite sides that they find an equilibrium that is like as close to the real price of something that it should be in reality, right? And Bitcoin just never had that until really recently, right? You could only buy Bitcoin on exchanges. You couldn't really do the full ecosystem of options and all the things that go into betting on an asset, all the commodities, right? Can I buy them in blocks? Can I buy them in little bits? Can I use them as collateral for loans? Like all these things create the sophistication that creates stability. So that's one thing that is going to continue to make Bitcoin more stable. The second thing is commodities generally tend to concentrate on the price of the production of the commodity, right? You obviously need a little bit of margin for the miner or whoever makes copper to like make their profit. But if there's 1,000 miners that are all doing anything, it's going to essentially be the price of copper is the price to mine copper, right? Maybe a little bit higher. Same thing with Bitcoin, right? The cost to mine a Bitcoin is on average like $80,000 to $120,000 depending on where you are on Earth with the cost of energy. So that's pretty stably around what it costs. And so as the every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that's mined every 10 minutes shrinks by half, right? And so that means that the cost of mining a Bitcoin doubles every 4 years. It stays the same. And so that's why you'll see like these jumps. Like the last cycle, it peaked at around 60,000, right? This cycle, it's peaked around 120,000. It's like literally because the reward was cut in half. It makes sense.
For those who don't know, that is part of the software of Bitcoin. It's
Yes.
part of the requirement. That's every 4 years, there's something called halving, HALVING,
Yes.
which makes, like
Yeah,
you
let me
just said.
explain blockchains because
Yeah.
they seem like magic to people.
Right.
And the reason why other blockchains are kind of, in my opinion, scams is because of the most basic things about what a blockchain is. So when you're a bank, right, your entire business is a ledger, right? So this guy has this much money and transferred it to that guy over there at this time, this amounts, check, right? He had the money to transfer it, right? Second one, she has the money to transfer it to this person, right? So here's the new balances, right? It's just a ledger, right? So a continuous line of transactions with everybody having zero, right? And then that's what a ledger is. A blockchain is just a ledger broken up into 10-minute chunks. Well, in some blockchains, it's different time period, but Bitcoin is like roughly every 10 minutes, a block of transactions is added to the whole list of transactions. That's all Bitcoin is. That's all the ledger is. That's all the blockchain is. It's a chain of blocks. Now, the reason why that's important is because, how long is the time? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 10 seconds? And how much can fit in a block, how much is allowed to fit in a block really dictates what the blockchain can be used for, right? If you want to create smart contracts and you want to do like trading algorithms and you have to embed all of that logic in a transaction, the size of a block has to be much, much bigger, right? But like if I want to transfer like 10 units from you to me, right? My address is this long and it's 10 from this address. That's pretty short, right? It's a few kilobytes maximum, even with a bunch of, fluff around it. And you can get that really, really, really small, which means I could do like hundreds of or thousands of transactions every 10 minutes and only use like a megabyte of space. And, it's sorry to get really technical about this, but the thing that's really important is that the entire blockchain, the entire history of every transaction of Bitcoin is a few hundred gigabytes, right? You've seen how cheap gigabytes are now. Like it's crazy, and so I can have a full copy of every transaction ever. And I can do it on a Raspberry Pi with a $100 SSD and be good for like 5 years, at least 5 more years with no upgrades. But if you want to do something like Ethereum or anything else, those blockchains are huge. I think I have to check this, but it's like going to get to petabytes in not too long. And that's expensive hardware. We're not talking terabytes. We're talking 1,000 times a terabyte, size of blockchains because they're logging every tracks in there. They've got, people are putting whole pictures in there for NFTs. Like it's just like it's so much that gets in there. So like, you could have theoretically maybe a billion people on Earth could afford to run a Bitcoin node because it's cheap hardware, but physically, the amount of disposable income to buy like essentially a server rack to run Ethereum or Solana or any of these other chains that are being adopted is just so huge that you only have hundreds of nodes, right? And so it's like much easier to capture 100 nodes, especially, if they're all in the United States or a bunch of them are in the United States. It's like you're at risk here. So it centralizes things. Like a blockchain has to be small to be decentralized. But that's why Bitcoin is so unique, is that it makes it a good money for many, many, many reasons. One of which is that it's, no one person's in control. The US government is in control of the dollar. The euro is controlled by the, European Central Bank. Ethereum is controlled by like three people have the capability of changing Ethereum. That creates risk, right? If you want to put your entire economy built on something, you want it to be something that the US can't just decide like one day to like take it away from you, right? Or some random person that founded the Ethereum Foundation to be able to take that away from you. So Bitcoin just is one of the way a blockchain works makes it, the best way of coordinating those economic transactions in a way that cannot be taken away from you.
Yeah, this is really good. The decentralization of Bitcoin is unmatched, and
Yes.
there are more and more nodes
Yes.
coming online every year.
Correct.
And every node that comes online makes Bitcoin even stronger and more
Correct.
decentralized and more
Correct.
future-proof, essentially.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry to get back
So
to your original question. It's
yeah,
just that blockchains they're not that complicated, but they're complicated enough that people kind of click off. And
right.
then they're confused about why people say Bitcoin is better or Ethereum is better than Solana or Solana is better than
Right.
Ethereum and so on.
Yeah.
And it really just comes down to the mechanics. Like hardware costs this much, it takes up this much space, it creates these incentives. But the reason why like you're going to be able to pay for stuff in Bitcoin, whereas like 10 years ago it's not possible, is many factors. And money always goes through the same transition. It starts out as a store of value, right? And it's like gold is a store of value because it's a stable price and people recognize it as that, right? So it starts out as a store of value, then it becomes a medium of exchange, right? So when I want to go buy something, gold's a bad example because like you need quite a few ounces to buy a house, but very few fractions of an ounce to buy, a steak. But it became a medium of exchange between governments, between banks, right? Which made it very good as money in that sense. And then when you wanted to buy like a coffee, you'd use a paper certificate that represented some tiny portion of gold, right? But it goes from from store value to medium of because people adopt it as a store of value, then they want to use it as a medium of exchange instead of using some other proxy. Then it becomes a unit of account, which is like, what do you price stuff in, right? You and me, we price stuff in dollars because we deal with it all day, right? Even if Bitcoin is like the most valuable thing on earth, we still may take a while to like think of things in the fractions of Bitcoin or Satoshis or bits or whatever people want to call it. That becomes like how we think about money, but it still could revolutionize the world as a store of value alone, or just as a store of value and a medium of exchange to go buy something. And this is evidenced by the fact that like I went to Steak and Shake the other day and I paid for that steak in Bitcoin. It took me 15 seconds and it delivered immediately to them for like no fees.
They take Bitcoin?
Yes, yes. Steak and
That's
Shake, the owner got orange filled, I think, and totally revolutionized the whole thing. And so I said, hey, can I pay in Bitcoin? They like pulled out a separate, like an iPad, generated a QR code, and I paid it, and it was done. And I sat there, and was like stunned. Nobody else around me, my father-in-law, my wife, whatever. But I was like, I don't think you guys understand. I just transferred value from me to them in under 15 seconds with almost no fees. There's no 3% of Visa. And the thing was that it's not T plus two. It's not 2 days until Visa gives them their money, right? That was instantaneously in their bank account for Bitcoin. And nobody was in the middle, right? Like nobody's in the middle. There were no people that could stop me from paying them, right? If I
right.
pissed off PayPal, they're not going to be able to cut me off from Venmo, right? This is much better than Venmo because I can't piss off a company or even a government and they can't cut me off. I can get that value to Steak and Shake without anybody's permission almost instantaneously.
Amazing.
that was revolutionary.
Yeah,
That's,
that's
it's like going to there and like chipping off a piece of gold,
yeah,
and then they own
yeah,
it, and they don't have to melt it and aggregate it and check it and
sure.
all
So
that stuff.
this is
Yeah.
going to be more and more
Oh yes.
available. And I'm starting to think, gosh, when should I start taking Bitcoin as part of my payment for services?
Accept it
Um,
because you can always sell it if you need to. Like,
yeah,
but
yeah.
using it, like I don't count people that buy Bitcoin as an investment to be adopting Bitcoin
Ah,
because it's not money until people use it, right? Even
yes,
if I have to
yes,
sell it to pay some people, but I get paid in it, or I pay out to some folks and I buy more with my, US dollars that I earn in other ways, that is adoption because that's being used as money.
right.
It's just that I have, you're back to the old world Europe where it's like, well, I could take gold to a different country and then
Yeah,
exchange it for francs and then use francs to buy baguettes in
yeah,
France.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
but you can't go to France with a German mark and get francs without a huge fee. But I can take
right.
gold and it's a lot easier to
Yeah,
get the local thing. So that is still adoption of the gold standard in history, and that would still be the adoption of the Bitcoin standard now.
right.
And I see that happening more and more. I mean, Square just released, or not just released, they just announced that next month they're going to give every person with a Square terminal, which is very many people
Yeah,
from coffee shops to restaurants, they're going to be able to take Bitcoin and still have US dollars land in their bank, or they can keep the Bitcoin with like no fees. So no 3% to Visa, no fees to Square, right? And that's an instantaneous upgrade to what Bitcoin can do for people.
that's
And
amazing. Oh
yes,
my
and
God.
merchants,
And
right?
I've heard that Stripe
Hmm.
is also probably going to allow that. I don't know. I haven't looked into it,
Yeah,
but
they
this
like
is
stable coins more, but yes,
okay. But this is trending in that direction for sure.
correct, correct.
Now that we talked about this briefly before recording, Fidelity,
Mm-hmm.
one of the major
Mm-hmm.
brokerages in the world, or at least in the States, now has an IRA account that's literally called Crypto Fidelity
Right.
Crypto IRA, which that IRA account is for trading Bitcoin. And
Hmm.
they have Litecoin and Ethereum as well, but
Sure.
we don't have to. We could just
We can
focus
forgive them
on
for that.
we can
Yeah.
forget it. We can focus on the main one. But okay, I want to make sure we get to the biggest objection that I keep hearing about
Mm.
Bitcoin is the energy
Energy.
usage, because a
Yeah.
lot of the people in my audience, wonderfully, want to live ethically.
Sure.
They want to do the right thing. Of course,
Yes.
it's wonderful. And so it's like, well, should I feel guilty if I have Bitcoin because I'm contributing to a energy intensive system?
Hmm.
Like, what should we think about that? And I think you need to connect this back to supply at some point, because
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think most of the good-hearted people in the world who think about energy use of anything are just think,
Hmm.
okay, there's a limited amount of energy, and there's also pollution. And so if whatever I do, I have this fan turned on right now, that's probably
Yeah.
causing pollution somewhere, and
Yeah. I
taking the
understand it.
energy that could be used in the hospital or something like that.
Yes.
So yes,
Yes.
yes. And I
Yeah.
just to give context, you are in the energy industry, so you know
Yes.
more about this than the average Joe. Yeah.
Yes. We help build Bitcoin mines
Oh, I didn't
folks
know
on
that.
stranded gas. Yeah. So
Wow.
very intimately familiar with the energy question and its implications, for the world. But there's many factors to this. So one thing is that I am of the opinion, and I want to convince as many people of this, that energy usage is a neutral moral thing, right? Producing energy might have moral implications, like how you do it, right? So if you're burning down a rainforest to produce energy, that's less good than a solar panel, right? And I can go into all the details. Like a solar panel is less destructive. It's not zero destruction to the planet, but it is much less than burning wood or coal or even natural gas in the long term, right? And so the question of production, I think, is more of the question of morality than it is about consumption, right? So who am I to say that an air conditioner is immoral when maybe an old lady would die without the cooling, right? Um, and like you can't really coordinate that with explicit, tips, right? What I value, a kilowatt hour of energy versus you for a different purpose is different. That's the whole thing about pricing. Like we use pricing to essentially measure how essential something is, right? For most people, they make trade-offs based on price. Billionaires, probably not, right? But If I have to have the trade-off between air conditioning and food, I'm going to pick food, right? And there's a reason for that is like I'm making a value judgment on what is more important to me and my family. And that's how we should, that's the easiest way to coordinate what is essential and what is not. Now, the question of, is the electricity consumption of Bitcoin network worth it? It's like, hey, if it was all solar and batteries, I think that people should have no problem at all. There should be no controversy at all because it would be the best, cleanest source of energy possible. Um, but we're not in that reality. So like if you're burning coal for it, you're burning natural gas for it, you're using hydroelectric dams for it, like you know, that question to me really as profound as like, look, what is the cost of not having Bitcoin? So the US dollar, in my estimation, is one of the greatest tools for tyranny on earth because it is horrible for people that the government prints money and essentially steals your savings. If you don't understand that interaction, you have $100 today, or in 1900, you have $100. 100 years later, that buys a lot less because there's many more dollars, right? And that's not because of greed of corporations. It's not because like, eggs are more expensive because things are more expensive. It's like literally it's because they printed so much money that your money is worth less. And that is a stealthy way to tax you without you feeling it the day it's done to you. It takes time. There's like many different things in between the bad action and the bad outcome for you, right? And so it is a tool for tyranny in the sense that it is stealing from you, can corrupt the money. They're the only legal, the Federal Reserve is a private company that can legally counterfeit your money, right? And counterfeiting is bad for everybody. It's only good for the thief that does the counterfeiting. And that's what I'd argue. The Fed does things that are good for banks. They don't do things that are good for you. So the US dollar is bad for you in that sense. It's also a colonial bad, actor. We use the US dollar to coerce other countries. And this is really explicit with we've seen, freezing the bank accounts of Russians, and how like, it's Canada did it to the truckers, like, hey, we shut down your bank account, like because you can't use anything but the Canadian dollar, right? And it's used explicitly to cut people off that are political enemies, which means that you are constrained in what you can say and do based on who's in charge, which is bad for freedom, for the ability to push back against bad people. And then also it's used in a much more abstract sense to harness from other countries. So the WTO, the World Bank, the IMF, they force policies onto countries that are really bad for them because they have to be in the ecosystem with the dollar. Oh, you don't want to trade with the US, that's fine, right? You can do what you want. But if you want to trade with us, the biggest market on earth, the person that can cut you off from trade to other countries too, you have to adopt our things. And those things are all built to extract resources to the colonizing power, which is, in the case of North Africa, France does the same thing to the people on the old French franc. It's there to extract resources for them by giving them money that they can print out of thin air, right?
Yeah, I think this is important for people to look into. US dollar and the inflation from the money printing is essentially
Yes.
taxing the whole
Yes.
world. It's taxing its own residents and
Right.
it's taxing everybody else as well.
It's bad for everybody
And
but the banks.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And so it's tyrannical. In many different ways. And the question is, what is the cost to human, like how much is being stolen from everybody by this system? It's immeasurable, especially over hundreds of years. It's immeasurable. Fiat money always is a tool for tyranny and thievery from the people that can print it, from the people that do actual productive things. And so the question is, how much would you pay in energy, in time, in resources to replace that system with something that cannot be used tyrannically against you, right? And that's a question I think that's really important to understand. What would you pay personally as a tax to make it so inflation goes away forever? I'd pay quite a bit. I don't know about you, but if I had to measure it, it's probably a lot more than 10% of my income is inflated away in some way. And that's not even counting the other ways that the US dollar is taken from me as a US citizen. It's even worse for somebody like Zimbabwe. right? Where they're being taken advantage of by the international order, as we. So I would pay the electricity production of Southeast Asia. Not that Southeast Asia has to pay for it. I'm saying that that's currently about as much electricity as being used by the Bitcoin network is like whole countries worth of electricity is being used. I'd pay even more electricity to do that because it is so important for fairness. And when money is fair, the world is way better. And you can read much smarter folks than I about this, but when we were on the gold standard, it's the most peaceful time in history in terms of the amount of war and people dying in war. Like the gold standard was a civilizing force. When we got off the gold standard, that's when the total war was invented, right in the early 1900s. Millions of people died. You never saw, wars where that many people died under the gold standard or even any hard money standard in China and so on. When you're under a hard money standard, war costs a lot. And it's usually something governments can't afford, so they don't get into. They're much more limited, right? You used to have to hire mercenaries, right? And they were expensive Swiss mercenaries, and it's like you could only really hire them for a few months and then they go home, right? You can't go 10 years in Iraq, right? You couldn't afford it. So
Wow, that's an interesting point that I hadn't thought of, and yeah, that's really yes, because a lot of the inflation, the money printing, of course, goes to serve the military industrial
correct,
complex.
correct.
So,
Because
oh,
governments don't really spend money; they create money by print. Well, the U.S. does this because we are the issuer of our own currency that we can pay people in, but we create money to pay for stuff. And then we tax money and it kind of like backfills. And this is evidenced by the fact that Elon found like 10, magic money machines that are used at the treasury to pay people. And they don't have to take it from somewhere. They just literally just credit accounts to other people and it comes out of nowhere. Money is also created mostly by banks. So this is not something people understand. It's like you don't go to the mint and see like the literal pallets of money coming out. That's not the amount of money that's being printed. It's not even the Fed that like creates the money out of nothing. That's not the volume that really creates most of the money. What really creates most of the money is banks because they are authorized to create money out of nothing by the Fed. So in this way, this happens is you put $1 into your savings account at a bank. It's not like they turn around and loan out 80 cents. That's not how this works anymore. They can create $9 on top of the dollar for every dollar you put in. And it's not like they go ask the Fed for that money and then the Fed gives it to them, or they're not taking it from somewhere and putting it over. They literally credit you the money to buy a house. That's part of how a mortgage works. They credit you $10 and they basically are authorized to do that because they got $1 of deposit from somebody else. That's where the money comes from. Most of the money comes from banks doing that at scale. And that's just creating money from nothing, right? But if they had to go pull a gold bar and give it to you to go buy a house, like the amount of, loaning and money out in the world would be a lot less. And so we really need to be cognizant of like the cost of this. Like the 2008 financial crisis would not have happened on a gold standard. It wouldn't have been possible. And on Bitcoin standard, even more so. And so, yeah, the energy usage question, like I think it's actually a morally good thing to use energy for this because the energy usage is what protects it from corruption. And if that's the cost, if that's the only cost to keep Bitcoin going and to replace this corrupt system, then it's absolutely morally good. But you just have to, come with me that the system today is bad, the system in the future is better, and this is the only cost, and that's not that high for how
mhm.
much is being done to people.
And the supply of energy is
It's
going to
gonna go
be
up.
increasing, and
Yes.
the cost is going to be decreasing because technology is going to be finding cheaper ways to create
Even
energy.
then, you're going to
Yeah.
double, triple, quadruple the amount of energy used for Bitcoin. So like that isn't a good argument for like why it's morally okay, because the amounts of energy is still going to go up. It's just that
Right.
it's going to be a smaller proportion of the total or something
Right.
will balance out. The real moral argument should be energy consumption is morally neutral. We should definitely clean up the production of energy, and we
Right.
will and are. But it is definitely worth the amount of investment to get rid of the current corrupt system. That is the core argument. Now, on top of that, Bitcoin is saving grids now. So,
Talk about this. This is really interesting. Yeah,
yes.
like
So in
never.
Texas,
Yes.
you remember that winter storm that like knocked out the grid for several days and people were
Yeah, I heard
frozen
about
in,
that.
right? That was a moment where Texas was like had a huge problem. Their grid was not as stable as it should have been, and it's people argue about why. But essentially, what happened was because of prices and price caps and all these things, people had to shut off or go bankrupt in terms of producing energy. And that shut off was enough for the whole grid to collapse, the whole thing. And I don't know if you understand this about grids. If it goes cold, you have to import generators to start up your generators, right? So a cold start for a grid, it makes sense, right? It's like these gigantic pieces of machinery. If they stop moving, you need energy to get them going. You have to like get a smaller thing to start a bigger thing to start a bigger thing. So, it's like spark plug the generator at a big turbine. And then once you spin it, you can start doing it. But like this is a complicated thing where like the pipelines didn't have power, so you couldn't get the natural gas pipelines to feed the turbines, even if you had a generator to restart it, right? And so that's why it was such a bad thing, was that the grid was not resilient to that 10% fluctuation, and it could not cold restart. And so the other grids are more resilient, but every grid is vulnerable to this style problem. It's just that, this happened in an extreme case to Texas a few years ago. Since then, they've become grid on Earth. And there's two big reasons for that. One, they've invested in a lot more storage of energy so they can be fluctuating to that. But secondly, is they now use what's called flexible load programs, right? So if that 10% is enough to screw up everybody's day, what if you could convince people to shut off enough so that even if you do have that problem again, where people have to shut off production, you have a commensurate amount of stuff being pulled off at the same time, right? And so you have flexible load. You don't want to shut off a hospital. Maybe you could turn off an aluminum plant, right? And so the question is, how do you get extremely quick, flexible loads that are fine turning off for a number of hours, minutes, days in order to keep the grid online? Bitcoin is perfect for that, right? You plug it into the grid and then you say, hey, we expect an outage in the next 12 hours. Like, we'd love to pay you a small subsidy to turn off for that period of time, or a big subsidy. It really doesn't. The amount of money people will pay is large. So, you tell these Bitcoin miners like, hey, turn off for these hours, and we'll pay you this much to turn off. And they're happy. It's like, cool. We're not paying for energy, but we're also not producing Bitcoin. That's okay. We're getting paid, right? And they turn off. And that is a service done to the grid that promotes reliability that is unmatched. So now it's like, it's not just, energy consumers that are, expanding the capabilities of the grid. They are actually making the grid more resilient. And it's not just Bitcoin miners, there's other flexible loads. But it's like 25% of all Bitcoin mining on Earth happens in West Texas. So like the amounts of energy that can be fluctuated quickly is enormous. And that's able to save the grid. And if we deploy that everywhere, it's like a Bitcoin mine is roughly equivalent to a battery for the same amount of capacity, right? For the purposes of keeping the grid balanced, especially if it's extremely quick. So this is a grid balancing thing. What's also nice is that, batteries are expensive, they're difficult. You can't produce a ton of them yet. It's ramping. It will be a dominant force in grids very, very soon. But if you want to deploy solar, you kind of need a flexible load on the other end to balance out the variability of the solar and the wind. And so you could actually, and many people have argued this, and I agree with them, that Bitcoin mines are actually promoting the implementation of renewable energy because they are a flexible counterpart that can help balance out some of the congestion that they cause in the grid.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot there. And
Yes.
I think there's a lot for people to look into as well.
Mhm.
And just last thing, when you say Bitcoin mines, of course, most people think, oh, they're
Right.
carving out those. No,
Pickaxes.
it's
Yeah.
just some
Computers in a
some
box. Yeah.
computers. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Amazing.
mean, large shipping containers full
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
computers that'll,
Computers. Yeah. Um, I have, as of today, a significant portion of my investments is now in Bitcoin. Just in the last,
congrats. How's
yeah,
it feel?
thank you.
Yeah.
And it feels amazing. I feel like we're securing, I'm securing the future for my family.
Mhm.
And obviously not investment advice. Everyone go look into it.
Yep.
But I do encourage everyone to definitely consider putting at least a percentage of whatever you have in savings,
Mhm.
you know, for the future, retirement, et cetera, put that into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And okay, man, there's so much more we could talk about. We'll
Oh
have to
yeah.
save it for another day. Thank you so much, Greg, really
Absolutely.
for showing up for this and
Mhm.
yeah, for everything that was shared. I think there's a lot more. I feel like we're planting the seeds for some important, you know, research that people should do.
Absolutely.
Viewers, my dog just climbed down in the bed. Anyway, so thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for
And
the
I
time.
will be putting your blog, your website
Mm.
into below the video. So be sure, folks, to check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All
thanks.
right. Take care.